This is the CW Spiral, a podcast run by three survivors of the CW's colon in 2022. We're your hosts, Sabrina Reed,
Michael Patterson,
and Reed Gowdens,
bringing you history about the network and the WB, the latest news and in-depth Sporterville discussions of the best and messiest shows to ever grace the small screen. We are back, briefly, to say goodbye to Superman and Lois, which is like, it's really bittersweet. I mean, it's amazing because they ended amazingly, but it's bittersweet because, we love Superman and Lois.
Mm-hmm. It's it's a moment you never wanted to come. I believe I said that when we recorded the Flash episode as well. It's a moment you knew was on the horizon. I mean, with Superman and Lois, there was a good chance that it shouldn't have been, it wouldn't have been, but unfortunately, the way the cookie crumbled, that's how it eventually ended up. But like, yeah, it's weird being on this end of it now. Like we've been on our podcast, we've been predicting when the final season might come, what the final season would look like, how they would cope with all the changes. And here we are on the end of it and feeling all the emotions because not only did one of the best shows the CW has ever produced go out, it went out on one of the strongest ever notes because I mean, like, what a finale, right?
It was fantastic. I mean, I think we all sort of expected, there was like rumors as we were watching the season that Clark was going to die. It was like it wasn't exactly written on the wall, but it was sort of whispered in the ear, if that makes sense. So like we prepared, and yet tears everywhere. Regardless of the preparation, the knowledge that it probably was going to happen, the crying still happened.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. I remember when they released the first trailer for season four, and we knew they were doing the death of Superman, but to see that adaptation come to life and then see that come to life in the actual episode, there was kind of a preparation for it because, like I said, we knew and we'd watched the trailer, so you were waiting on those scenes to play out. In the finale, however, we knew nothing about the finale heading into it, how this amazing story was going to end, and just it almost felt like a full circle moment that paid tribute to what the
Mhm.
show was at its heart. Um, and like, I mean, like, it's we only had 10 episodes here to bring one of the biggest shows the CW has ever done to a close. And initial thoughts, I can say, not only did they nail it, they knocked it out of the park. By far, one of the best series finales I've ever seen in my life. Never mind the CW, never mind the Arrowverse, never mind DC TV. Definitely one of the best series finales I have ever watched. Um, I had the pleasure of watching it in advance, and I was like teasing fans all week, saying you need to watch this, you should watch this. In the back of your mind, when you tease people with something like that, you're like, oh, this better live up to expectations. I hope people aren't disappointed. And just seeing the response from everyone that they all felt the same way as I did, and that they all thought it was a thrilling conclusion, an emotional conclusion, an epic conclusion, but most of all, a worthy conclusion to the story. Um, I mean, you can't ask for better than that, especially as, like I said, the start of the season really set the bar high with the Doomsday Battle, the Death of Superman adaptation, and everything that came after that. But they really brought it home in that last episode. I mean, I can't praise it enough.
They really did. Well, first of all, though, you are a trustworthy source. So if you're
Yeah.
excited, people should know that it's going to be exciting. Like you don't just hype things up to hype them up. But like it is I think it's one of those things. I saw some of your tweets where like you can read someone's excitement and be excited
Mm,
too, but not really understand the gravity of it until you're watching. And it's like, wow, like there's words can't really describe the feelings that the series finale gave me. Um, and I mean, we try, we're writers, but like it's almost undescribable to talk about what they managed to do, the plane they managed to land. Like they didn't just dock the boat. Like we arrived, there was a carpet, like they held our hand as we walked down the steps. It was very much a love letter to Superman and to Lois and to the family drama they created and to us. For being
mhm,
on this journey. And I think there was a lot of trust that the audience would understand what they were doing.
mhm,
I think though, before we launch fully into our series finale discussion, we do have to discuss the final season as a whole. I think that with only 10 episodes, what they wanted to do was very ambitious. And I'm not talking about like the action sequences or even really oh, what is this man's name? Because I don't care for him. I know he's the big bad Lex. Like so, but But even putting Lex to the side, this season is really ambitious because it wants to get viewers on board with the idea that in this universe, the Lane Kents are going to be out and open about their family dynamic. And that is a choice, like whether for good or for bad, whether you thought the execution was excellent or you thought it could have been better, it is a story about what it means to decide that for the health of yourself and for your family, that you are going to reveal a gigantic part of yourself that is dangerous for other people to know. And I thought that was a worthwhile story. I didn't always agree with it. Definitely would not have been a person who was like, yes, my husband is Superman.
Right.
Like,
Right.
yeah, no, we would have been arguing in the house about this because no, I mean, because the level of danger it brings into your life. But I do understand the point that they were making.
Hmm.
That for this Clark, it is necessary to unburden himself of being alone in this aspect of his life. Like he had his family, but it's different to be able to walk in his town that he loves and people know. Like so, I thought that was a very gorgeous story to tell, and I thought they did it well.
Yeah. No, they absolutely did. And I think the word you used there absolutely sums it up perfectly. Like ambitious. They tackled a lot this season, and a lot of these storylines that they kind of picked up and put down and picked up again were storylines that would have served any single season well, but all decided to do it together in the final season and the shortest season at that. And I think they absolutely fulfilled every single one of them. Like it's no secret that they had a cast cut this season, and the former series regulars had to return as guest stars. It's no secret that the budget was slashed as well. So they obviously had to be limited in what they could do in certain episodes, and disperse the budget across the season as necessary. And I think we had Doomsday in about 5 or 6 of the 10 episodes, which incredible. Um, the premiere opened with that fight scene between Clark and Doomsday, which they released at Comic-Con, and like I saw the response to it then, and then the response to it came back again when it actually aired. The greatest battle between Superman and Doomsday we've ever seen on the screen, without a doubt. There's not really that much competition in that field, but like of what we've seen, there's no doubt about it. That's at the top of that. Well, I say greatest. Maybe the one in the finale was even better. Of course, Superman and Lois outdoes itself. Um, and then you also then have to acknowledge the fact that, like I said, they didn't have all the cast members. They successfully managed in 10 episodes. I think episode 1 and episode 9 were the only episodes to feature the core 4 original cast members on their own. Every single other episode than that had at least 2 or 3 of the former series regulars come back, and that allowed the final season to sustain that heart of Smallville, that small town vibe that separated Superman and Lois from the rest of the Superman adaptations. And I think they successfully pulled that off. And I think what also worked really well is because those characters had limited screen times, they couldn't have as long ongoing arcs. So while they did have their ongoing storylines, they were also kind of pivotal to the main storyline as well. You saw Sarah getting involved with the boys when they tried to one up Lex. We didn't see that in previous seasons. Sarah was never really involved in the super stuff until that point. Um, we saw Kyle and Chrissy heavily involved with Clark and Lois in the episode where Clark ended up revealing himself in front of the Smallville town residents. And I think that really drove home how close Kyle and Clark had become, how close Lois and Chrissy already were. And it's nice to see the Kents have a friendship, have 2 friends as a couple. Like that, the 4 of them then made a great friendship group, which you almost wish you could see more of for other episodes. Um, I think that was definitely beneficial to the storytelling. It also allowed us to focus more on the actual core 4 because Jonathan and Jordan had their own subplot where the 2 of them were involved. We weren't doing an episode with Jonathan's storyline, we weren't doing an episode with Jordan's storyline. They were involved in the main Clark and Lois storyline, but they also had their own subplot going on at the same time. And we've always said we wanted more scenes between Jonathan and Jordan. So this season managed to really strengthen the character dynamics. I know I mentioned the CGI and I know I mentioned the epicness of it all, but one thing Superman and Lois does better than the vast majority of shows on TV is its character dynamics. Like you can't argue that its characters weren't at the heart of the final season, even the ones that only had 2 or 3 episodes to show up, because all of them felt every bit as pivotal to the storyline as they always were. And I think that is how you do a good final season because we've talked on this podcast about how other shows on this network in the shared universe misunderstood that point, whereas this show absolutely did not.
No, I feel the same. I think the thing about Superman and Lois, as far as the writing team goes, is that they did what they wanted. And I know we
Mhm.
always like that comes with its own weaknesses, but it also comes with its strengths. And I think that this team behind the show was fearless in the stories that they wanted to tell.
Yeah.
Regardless of how fans were going to feel about it, it was going to be a family drama. And it was going to test your understanding of who Kent is as a person, who he is as a superhero, and who he is as a father and husband. Like that
Mhm.
is just really at the core of the show. And it did the same with Lois. Really does the same with Smallville as a town too. I think what I enjoy about Superman and Lois is that it is a testament to Clark's personal life and Lois's personal life. And yes, that's been examined before, but it's not been examined to the breadth at which this show does. With exception to obviously Smallville, but we're talking about a different era of television. We're also talking about a teenage Clark and him growing into the man he's going to become to be. We are sitting with a Clark who, he's seasoned.
Mhm.
It's not an origin story. He's a very settled superhero. He's a very settled father. He's a very settled husband. So the fact that this series begins with him being unsettled because he loses his mother and then he has to come back to his small town and like who am I now? Having grown in my powers, having fallen in love, had to start my own family, and moved away from the big city back to a small town. What does that look like? And I
Mhm.
thought that was a very interesting place to put him in. And where he ends up by the end of the season, the final season is gorgeous. I mean,
Yeah.
taking a man who was raised to hide himself, and you end the series with him, with everyone knowing who he is. I mean, that like first chapter, close of the book, that line all the way through, we can quibble about, how certain storylines were done. We can get angry about, choices they made in the plot through the seasons. But that through line is one of the most gorgeous things I've ever seen done for superhero TV.
Yeah, it felt like a full circle moment for him, didn't it? Because like you really didn't like Superman's always going to be Superman. He's always going to be lighthearted. He's always going to be triumphant. And he's always going to be one of the most hopeful superheroes out there. But when you strip all of that away, you do see that there is a real person in there. And I really feel like Superman and Lois did a wonderful job of highlighting who Clark Kent, or if you want to go further, who Kal-El is. And yes, he's still all of those things, but like you said, he's a seasoned veteran at this point, and this show allowed him to be more reflective on his life and his upbringing and who he was at his heart. And I feel like he wanted to set a good example for the boys as well. And I think that's what Superman and Lois started over. He wanted to be honest with them, or he at the very start he didn't want to be honest with them. It was Lois whispering in his ear that ultimately made him realize that maybe it's time to tell the boys the truth. And if right from that moment when he revealed the truth to them in the first episode, right through to the series finale, he's always been learning more about who he is and who he could be, and sharing more parts of himself with the people around him. You saw in season two, he finally opened up to Lana about being Superman. By the end of season three, Kyle knew. Um, so a lot of people in town sort of kind of picked up on the secret the longer it went on. So much so that when he revealed the truth in the end, none of his friends needed to be shocked by it because all of them already knew. And that in itself was a huge step for Superman. But stepping out of the shadows and like even see here's how comfortable he felt in Smallville. First of all, that reveal scene when Emmett Burgundy shot the bullet and he opened
Gorgeous.
the shirt, absolutely not only beautifully shot, but like one of the most almost sentimental and heartfelt and like bittersweet. Like there no dialogue in that scene, and I felt myself welling up as soon as it cut to that shot after the gunfire, and you saw the reaction of people's faces. That pan out shot where you just saw Superman standing in Vicky Mays. It looked almost so abnormal to see this normal cafe that you would see in any soap, and someone standing there in one of the most glorious superhero suits I have ever seen. I have to say, this show has gotten its suit better and better each season, and that's one of the best versions of the Superman suit we've ever seen. But to see it there looking so cinematic, and just Clark's kind of like, there's a sense of relief in his face when it pans out there. I feel like that's one of the most glorious scenes the show's ever done, and it was a full circle moment for him because, like I said, the people in the town find out then and there, but they still allowed him time. I don't know whether it was the next day, the day after that, that he got the Daily Planet team together to do that interview. Like the secret didn't spill out and travel across the world in those few days. The heart of Smallville remained because they were always loving and accepting towards him. They may have been shocked to find out that secret, but he was still lovable farm boy Clark Kent to them. And I thought that was a nice moment because yeah, he got to share a secret with the world in his terms, even though it kind of got out of the cat came out of the bag a little bit earlier than he planned. He still got to have that moment, and the way Tyler Hoechlin portrayed that scene where Clark just got to open up about who he was and like riff about his family and his life in Smallville and his new family, obviously with Lois and the boys. That little like side of the mouth kind of smirk as he talked and reminisced about his life. That is who Clark Kent is, and he finally got to share that with the world before the end of the season. And I know on paper I'd be like, I'd never be sharing that information with the world because it puts a target on your back. It can make you unsafe. But from a character standpoint, I completely agree. You can't argue with that. It was just such a beautifully handled moment. And I know a lot of people, comic book fans, said that they never liked the arcs where Superman revealed his identity to the world in the comics, but the way that Superman and Lois handled it, it made it believable. It made it serviceable to the character. It made it true to who Clark Kent is. And it felt like a full circle moment that only a final season could have pulled off. Sorry, only a good final season could have pulled off. And it was a home run. I feel like I'm going to use that term a lot in this episode. It was an absolute home run, and it brought the story full circle. And I couldn't have asked for a better full circle arc for Clark Kent. This is a character that a lot of people say is uninteresting. Watch Superman and Lois, and I bet you by the end of the series you'll feel differently because that Clark Kent is one of the most interesting characters television has ever seen, and the finale drove it home.
It did. I think why some people think that he's uninteresting, and I don't understand those people, but if I was to try to be in their shoes, it would be because he's inherently good.
Yeah.
A lot of his stories are about, you know, being true to yourself, but also taking the high road at times when most people wouldn't. And part of me gets why some people are annoyed with that. They want more complexity, even though I think that's complex in itself. I mean, it is harder to decide not to sink to somebody's level than it is to decide you're going to remain true to who you are. And you can even in the show, Clark struggles with it. I mean,
Mhm.
hello, in the final scene, he is beating Lex in the street.
Right.
He's just like,
I
there was
mean,
no rise above in that moment. He had a full-on Bruce Wayne moment. By the way, Tyler Hoechlin's growly voice, I was like, perhaps, unless he already has been cast before as an animated Batman, I don't know. Another DC check for Tyler
oh,
because
definitely
it was good.
deserved.
Deserved. I was like, this red light, we're giving Matt Reeves the Batman right now. Like, he's got the growl going on and he's just going at it with Lex. It's
Yeah.
just, it was fantastic. But beyond that, what I think I enjoyed too about the reveal is that this, like, though some of the small town people, some of the Smallville people are a little starstruck, it's actually the out-of-towners who are harassing the Clint family,
Hmm.
not the people who actually live in the town. And also for the interview that he did, I love that one, it takes place in the kitchen that he grew up in. Or is it
Yeah.
the kitchen or is it the dining room? Or the dining room's off the kitchen, so it's
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but and he's not in a super suit.
Right.
He is just himself. Like he's like Superman is his job. He is Clark Kent. Like,
Hmm.
and I just think that it was a beautiful way of visually conveying that he is the man under the suit. The suit does not make him, he makes the suit.
100%.
And I am like, the minds of this team. Like, yes. Like, because I think there was a way to do this the traditional rote way of, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman,
Yeah.
and sort of miss the elements that the comics have that some of the other series have had. He's not I'm gonna name drop your site, Michael, but it is Bam Smack Pow. But it is also, heart and love and family and connection and in growing into yourself. I love that it is a story about a grown person continuing to grow into themselves. Because I think sometimes in storytelling, there's this idea that you get a certain age and you're done, an adult.
Yeah.
You don't have to delve into anything. If there are any teenagers watching us, it's a lie. It's a fallacy. It's you get to adulthood and you're still growing. You're still
Yep.
learning about yourself, and you're still unpacking things that you may not have realized was potentially traumatic. I think there's great elements of, particularly in this final season, Clark sort of coming to terms with the way that he was raised
Hmm.
and not blaming his parents for it, but also coming to understand that it made it very difficult for him to make connections with people.
Sure.
And that's not necessarily anybody's fault. They were doing what they thought they needed to do in order to protect him, but it did cause problems as he got older. And I just yes, let's do that work. Let's unpack that. By the way, when you become an adult, you say unpack a lot. Just so
Yeah.
for anyways, but it is true. You are constantly unpacking things from your past for good or for bad, and it helps you become a better person. And I just
Hmm.
really love that that is what they centered the final season on. It's also what they centered the entire show on, but we really hit it home in the final season. Now, I have my personal gripes. I think you probably know, Michael, what the gripe is, but I will spell it out for anybody if you haven't seen my live tweets. It's Lex.
Yep. I knew it was coming.
It's Lex. And I think I don't care for this version of Lex. I do think that, because Clark and Lois is in the boys' story was so complex, there being a lack of nuance for Lex bothered me. He's
Mhm.
very one note. It's all revenge. I think the only time that I really felt connected to him and his villainy was when his daughter shows up. And you can see, I did think that Michael Cudlitz did a really great job of conveying how a desire for revenge can corrode all your relationships and keep you from the thing that you wanted. But I did appreciate too that the one of the aspects in which they could have done it better was that Lex has an issue with accountability. It is never his
Mhm.
fault. And you can really see that in that episode that that is how he moves in the world. And because he doesn't have the ability to take accountability, it eats at him. It's not his fault he doesn't have a relationship with his daughter. It's everyone else's fault. Like, it's
Mhm.
not his fault he was in prison. It was Lois's fault. I'm like, to a degree, yes, but you were still out here killing. Like, you were,
Right.
like, she put you in jail for the wrong crime, but you absolutely deserve to be in jail. And the idea that he believes he's never done anything wrong in his life, that really all he's done is retribution because people have done things wrong to him. It's like, no. And his sad home life feels so sad for that little boy. You are not that little boy anymore, though.
Hmm. Hmm.
I know, like, because those scenes did break my heart, though, when you saw, like, when he unpacked, when he talked
There we go.
about, when he talked about the household he'd grown up in and his deadbeat father, and then his mother taking it out on him that he left. Like, I was like, oh, baby Lex, so sorry to you. Sorry to you only, not to adult Lex. But, but yeah, I had a problem with Lex, and I think maybe if we had more episodes we would um we would have been able to have a more nuanced portrayal of him as a villain because he's not mustache twirly, but he is like ham-fisted isn't the word. It's more like he's a repeated punch to the face. And I
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like that metaphor. Yeah.
and I think it's all the same force. And I think in storytelling you need layers to that. And there just wasn't it wasn't always there.
Yeah, I feel like there is a very obvious conversation, like we've said before, about how Clark Kent isn't that interesting of a character. I feel like there is a more subtle conversation about how Lex Luthor often isn't that interesting of a character because I think Superman and Lois nailed all the like beats of what Lex Luthor does. That is like Lex Luthor, but they also did it with a very non-traditional version of Lex Luthor. This one isn't comfortable in suits. This one isn't comfortable in front of a camera, whereas the more traditional one is. And I guess maybe it kind of depends on the show as to whether Lex exists or fits into that world. I feel like the more gritty, realistic version of Lex definitely worked in Superman at Lois, but at the same time, it also then highlighted some of the issues with the Lex Luthor character, which just is lack of accountability. Like we had John Cryer's version on Supergirl, which is probably the best traditional Lex Luthor we've ever seen. And like no accountability there. quite campy, very vibrant, larger than life in the very way that Lex Luthor is known to be. But because we went for this more realistic, grounded version, maybe we did need a little bit more nuance there to explain. I don't know if you can ever really explain why Lex Luthor is going to Lex Luthor because he just does what he wants. But at the same time, and because him going from revenge driven to Amanda back to revenge driven didn't resonate with you in the way that it would if it was a protagonist of the show. If you saw that happen, you'd be like, oh no, there's no saving them now. Whereas you're like, oh, Lex gonna Lex again, I say. So it didn't really have the same kind of vibe, if you know what I mean. Um, but there were definitely moments of beauty where it felt like the arc was reaching its like pinnacle, which was, of course, when he set the trap for Clark with the red kryptonite lights. But Clark Kent absolutely held his own in that fight and won it. But of course, then Lex got the one up via the debate. Um, and then I to kind of pivot into the series finale, there's a moment after the Lex battle is over where Clark says it's over, and then there's another moment later on when Lois finds out that his appeal has been denied, and she was like, "It's finally over, we did it," and she gets emotional. Both of those moments felt incredibly earned because throughout the whole season, Lex was one step ahead of them constantly. And when you have all these superpowers, when you have this fame, when you have this respect that Lois Lane has, that should not have happened. And yet Lex is rage driven to be one step ahead of them every single time. That by the end of the season that ultimate defeat felt so earned and you felt yourself getting emotional with these characters because it was finally over. I'd say Michael Cudlitz did a fantastic job as this kind of unhinged Lex Luthor that we hadn't seen before. I was kind of nervous. Superman and Lois kind of does tradition so well that when we went for such a different Lex, I was a little nervous about how they would pull it off. I know we have the typical Lex Luthor gripes, but I think in terms of how he existed in the show, they pulled it off. And Michael Cudlitz was phenomenal from start to finish. One of the most intimidating villains I've ever seen that it almost felt like you were watching a different show when he was on screen. You always pointed out about how he had the rock riff in the background or the music whenever he showed up. And like that they sustained that. It was a different show when Lex was on screen, and I think that's why he worked as the final villain. Because yeah, sure, we had Doomsday, size of a massive rock, absolutely pummeling Clark, but that was all down to Lex. Everything that went wrong in the season was all down to Lex. They saved the most unhinged, worst, and in terms of Superman level, best villain for last. And I think they mostly pulled it off because, like I said, those moments in the finale were certainly earned.
He's relentless.
Yeah,
Just
perfect word for it. Yep.
relentless. There's no room to breathe.
Hmm.
Like every time they felt like they could catch their breath, he was back. I really, if I, set aside my gripe with the lack of nuance, I think the thing that I appreciated for Lex in the season is that, we start with the way he likes to play games.
Hmm.
It's the buying up of land. It's first forcing people off their property. It's changing public opinion of you. Um, and then when that doesn't work, him in that, abandoned hotel, like it's just, just to see sort of where the snap comes. And it comes when his daughter decides, what, I'm done. You can't choose me over your petty revenge, even though technically it's not petty. It's a valid want for revenge. It just gets really, really petty.
Yeah.
But but you can see that break. Well, if I can't have my daughter, you can't have anything.
Hmm.
And that, slow slide into, you're right, unhinged and derangement. Because it gets, by the time we're in the finale, he's deranged. We've
Completely.
all lost, we've lost the thread, we've lost the plot. It is just simply, they need to die. In order for me to have peace, they have to be gone. And it's funny because Lex is a character who will never have peace.
Never. There's always going to be a new enemy or something else that'll keep him going. And I think you definitely saw that, particularly in the final two episodes.
You do, and I think for that part is interesting, right?
Hmm.
The just that the where you can get to a place as a person where nobody can get in, where you're so lost and I would call it grief.
Hmm.
It's grief for him. You're so, even though no one passed away, it's the loss of time with his daughter. It's the loss of time. The caging. It's really about the cage. He was imprisoned. He was put in a cage for 20 years, and he is rabid. So like that is interesting. Um, I not interesting though was they didn't know what they wanted to do with Amanda.
Hmm.
Did not at all know what they wanted to do with Amanda. She had the plan. If there was gonna be a line, it was about her plan no one knew about. Like, like all the time. You're not sticking to the plan. I said, can we hear the plan? Just once. Because I don't know what the plan is.
Sure, the plan with his besties. Yeah, I know what you mean. That almost felt like a plot device, but just to kind of further her arc. I think they brought it home in the end when we found out that she was basically the same as Gretchen Kelly was the fake name. I don't remember that woman's real name. Cheryl Kimball, there you go. She was the second generation of her, meaning that Lex had been there before with a devoted woman who absolutely gave up everything to do what he wanted and then fell in love with him. Um, how this man made two women fall in love with him, I do not know. There's no redeeming
Three.
qualities.
Three, because there's the ex-wife, and that's
Oh,
the
that's
like,
true. That's true. That's a
yeah.
great point. No redeeming qualities in this man whatsoever. So I do not know how that happened, but it very much kind of drove her arc home in the end. I know I felt like she kind of started coming into her own in like episode 8 when she organized the debate, in episode 9 when she started to see the cracks there, and then she did what she needed to in episode 10 by turning on him. Um, we could have had maybe a little bit more time to play with that because Amanda's actually one of the characters that's been on screen most throughout the season. So we definitely could have had chance to kind of explore her character. But Yvonne Chapman did a wonderful job. Big fan of her in Kung Fu, and I was happy to see her get this like prominent role in this series as well. Um, you mentioned Lex. What was justified versus what was petty, and I feel like the ninth episode definitely drove that home because even if he did have a justified reason for wanting some kind of revenge, that man was going to be petty till the end. And I feel like we
Mhm.
absolutely saw that when he brought Doomsday back into the equation, not to attack Clark and Lois. Of course, they'd get in the way because they're the great protectors. But he brought them back in, brought Doomsday back into the equation to destroy Smallville just because they said no to him. And I'm like, that that you want to strip everything away. That is what Lex Luthor is, a gigantic man child who does not like being told no. And I mean, like, if you read the comics, that's kind of what he is. So even though this was such a non-traditional Lex Luthor, that underpinning ideal of who he is, I think they kind of nailed it through and through.
I can see that then. I really can. Because no, that was I remember watching that scene and I was like, really? So we're gonna just kill tens of thousands of people. Like, because actually, what is the population of Smallville? Are we in the thousands or the 10,000s?
I want to say thousands, but I don't know.
But in either case, though, we want to destroy Main Street again. We
Yeah.
want to make sure that no one can rest in this town. It was funny seeing Amanda try to flee because I was like, "Where are you going?" It's like it's Kansas. You could be going for a while. They
Right.
just
She was just like, I'm out of here.
I know there's so much flat land.
True, yeah. And I mean, he
Uh,
caught up to her in the end as well.
well, because wide open space, there's nowhere to hide. This is not a city. He can just see you as your little car moves down, like down through the lane. I was like, no, you're not. We're gonna have to come back because there's just no
Yeah.
way you're getting out of this
She should
area.
have just stayed in town. I know that the beast might have been there, but if she was surrounded by an army of super people, I feel like she would have been all right. And she did. Like I laughed so much when the boys saved her from Lex. The like miffed look on his face is like another thing's gone wrong because of these teenagers. Um, I feel like that's a good point to pivot into the finale because like we set the stage was set in episode 9. I remember when I got a 9 and 10 together as screeners, and I did not know they were essentially going to act as this two-parter. Um, and wow, the ending of 9 really set the stage perfectly for 10 because like they do work as a two-part finale, but the action really kicks into gear in the final episode. Um, and it all just kind of comes together. It's very much the final episode is very much a tale of two halves. We spend the first 20 minutes dealing with the action. We spend the second 20 minutes dealing with the emotional full circle moments that the Kent family and that indeed the Smallville town residents have been through. And I mean, like as a standalone episode, I feel like the big battle between Superman and Doomsday had to happen, sure, but the big battle between Superman and Lex also had to happen. Um, and I think they pulled both of them off dramatically. We talked about how the show was limited all season with its budget, with its cast and everything, but you would not have known that if you watched that final episode.
No, that sky battle between Lex and Clark is just amazing. It's gorgeous. There's so many, like there's like pinks and oranges. Like they're really like save the budget for this.
Hmm.
Doomsday can look a little crunchy in some scenes, but the budget has to be for this guy. Like
Yeah,
that seemed, and to be fair, I do think sometimes there is over expectation for broadcast. I guess that's not going to be the case now, in
yeah,
terms of of CGI, but there is, it's broadcast television, it's not streaming. They don't get the
exactly.
big budget that the streaming shows do. So if there are points in which you can see, Doomsday could have looked better, look the other way. Overlook
Right.
it. Like it's fine. But I've actually thought, for the limited budget, he looked amazing.
He really
Like
did.
they spent the money in the close-up shots. He had more movement in the back half of the season than he did in the first half of the season. So they were very smart about what they wanted to do because in the first half he was standing a lot.
Hmm.
Because with exception to his fight with Clark on the moon, he was sort of standing and holding people, standing and holding
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
And that had to do with the budget. But by the time we got towards, the end, he's moving a lot more.
yeah.
And I love, when you can tell that they were smart about what they wanted because
Sure,
he
absolutely.
honestly needed to move more, particularly in the finale as we're flying forward and attacking. Um, it's a really well executed uh, special effects and CGI.
Hmm. Yeah, without a
Uh,
doubt. The graphics were insane. I know I agree. The animation occasionally struggled the way he moved. So you were right. They lit him very well. But on that note, the bravery to have the big final battle scene with a CGI monster in broad daylight
mhm.
was, we again, there's that word ambitious. It's just, didn't they pull it off?
They did, and well, I love that. So they do the color, they did the color treatment to be able to hide some of the things.
Hmm.
I We're getting nerdy, you guys, but that is what they did. I mean, that's why the scene is kind of really orange.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and that's absolutely fine, whatever. Like in order to make it work to hide some flaws, but also, to be able to shield the fact that it is a big CGI monster fighting real people in broad daylight. We have to make choices like that. And I thought those choices were very great. They were very smart.
Hmm.
Um, what was it? The first half of the finale was exceptional. Tense the entire time. Which is interesting because to sustain that level of tension for what for TV that'd be like 20 minutes because if you factor in the
Hmm.
commercials, um 20 minutes of tension on a broadcast television show. That like I mean it works because it's an action series too, but that is a lot of tension to hold and spread
Hmm.
around to different characters. And they landed that. It
Yeah,
is uncomfortable watching that fight sequence. Not because you think anybody's gonna die. I didn't think anybody was gonna die, but like because you're like, well, what's gonna happen next? How are we gonna get out of this? We're fighting on Main Street. Like,
right.
what new thing is going to happen? And yet they still reserve time for Clark and Lois to be arguing in the middle of the street about allowing the boys to fight too. And I was like, yes, I love a married couple having an argument in the middle of a battlefield.
Right.
Like, because it's it's funny to say it's reality, but it's true. You do get into arguments like that in the middle of danger.
Right, right. Like, ain't nobody doing it like Lois. Like, honestly, like, the fact of the matter is, the show does family drama and superhero stuff so well. It wouldn't have been right if we didn't have both of them spill into the final battle because, like, yeah, you're right. We pivoted from the CGI battle to this couple arguing about the future of their children and the men they've grown into, and about one of them needing to let go more. And I thought that was absolute dramatic bliss. Like, what more could you want from a family-driven superhero show?
Nothing more. I think that's why I'm in love with this show.
Yeah.
That it knows how to balance that. And you still get classic Lois, like call it no powers whatsoever, standing there in her was she like a cream coat or something?
Hmm.
Um, and just laying into Lex. You coward. She was essentially you pathetic man baby. Like, let go of my child. Like you feel so big and strong because you're choking out a 16-year-old. And I love how he was like, he has powers. And she was like, and?
Right, right. No big man, regardless of how dangerous he is or superpowered he is more intimidating than an angry mother. And I feel like you really saw that because she came for him, but also even just to highlight how clever Lois is, she baited him into attacking her so she could put that on it, and it worked like a dream. Any insecure, villainous man, all you have to do is call them out and make them feel a thousand levels below their station, and they will come for you. And she nailed that to perfection. That is the journalist in her. That is the mother in her, and she did a wonderful job of that. Bitsy, oh, it was only a couple of lines of dialogue, but she acted the heck out of that moment. I was like, that is my Lois Lane, and no one else will ever hold that crown because she nailed that.
There's so much swagger. Like she's
Yeah.
just she rocked up and she was like, "Let me handle this." Because what you're not gonna do is choke my child. Like I may not have powers, but I'm going to make you feel absolutely small, and then I'm gonna wreck your life. Like it was just, it was so great. I love her. It was reminiscent of I don't remember which season that is, but when Candace's father attacked
Mm,
John, and she was like, "I don't care who you are." Like who like and you know she's had her cancer diagnosis at that point, you know.
hmm
So she's not feeling well. So already on the wrong foot. But the fact that you even touched your child is on. And it's
Yeah.
fully on. Like so I love that about her. And it makes sense for Lois, obviously. But it's like wonderful to see because they don't really have I'm trying to think of live action adaptations and there are no children. So
hmm
for them, you don't see that. So it is great to see Lois as a mom and really
100%.
really laying it down about what she's not going to tolerate. I think so. I did see a tweet on finale night where someone had their gripe was that like why would you spend so much time in the back half on the family when more time should have been spent on um, Lex in Doomsday. And I think I do want to not address that person, but just address that mindset. Because I think sometimes that comes from people who don't watch a lot of series finales. Because it's a common refrain I see, you know, well, why did we spend 30 minutes on like wrapping up the action and then the 30 minutes in the back half of the episode is all about what happens next. And so for those that don't know, that is how finales work
hmm
traditionally. You fix the season problem or the series long problem in the first half, and the back half is the goodbye. I know that's not true for some series, but it's true for a lot of them. So
Yeah.
if you were like, oh, they should have spent more time on Lex and Doomsday, they were never going to do that, particularly on this show. But it's just not how finales work.
Right.
They
And I
just
feel
don't do
like
that.
at the end of the day, they had to, like you said, tie up both the season arc and the series arc. And I feel like they devoted 20 minutes to the season arc and then devoted the other 20 minutes to the series arc. Um, I mean, like, could you really ask for more from a series finale than that? And I get that this is a superhero show, but this episode, I think what it did so well is it still technically had to function as a part two because the inciting incident, all the situation that they're in at the moment had been set up in the previous episode, Doomsday, the battle, all of that. So there was no three act structure to this episode like a normal episode of television could do. We were already in the battle. There was no more inciting incident because the battle had begun. Lex was hovering overhead like he'd basically been doing all season. So it had to wrap that up as well, and it had to give the fans the big battle that we were all waiting for. And we got two of them. We got Superman and Doomsday. We got Superman and Lex Luthor, and we got Lois getting one up on Lex in the middle because it's important to remind people that while Lex Luthor is Superman's arch enemy, in this series he was kind of Lois's arch enemy. So it was important that she set in motion his downfall, and that's exactly what she did. And we got all of that. But at the end of the day, we've been watching this show for 4 seasons. We've fallen in love with all of these characters for 4 seasons. You have to devote time to the rest of the character, not just the rest of the characters, all of the characters. And I feel like a lot of people thought maybe the wedding wasn't the most convincing aspect since we didn't really get to see Lana and John Henry fall in love over the season. They weren't, the finale was the only episode that the two of them were in at the same time. But I feel like it kind of worked, and the time jump obviously did a lot of heavy lifting there. But between the opening scene of them talking about how they just couldn't find time for each other versus how the battle ultimately changed that because when there are life or death situations and you care about someone, it puts things in perspective and makes you realize that maybe you can work through distance and time and the amount of dates you've gone on it. And they did. And I feel like those two characters deserved a happy ending. And I was so thrilled we've talked about in this podcast about how much I love Lana, and I was so happy that we got to see her get that happy ending that she deserves. But it's also important to note that the finale wasn't just about Lana and John Henry's wedding. It brought all of the main characters back. You got to see that Kyle and Chrissy were happy and that they had their child, and then another one was on the way. You got to see that Sarah had finally figured out that she wasn't as fulfilled in Smallville, but that she was going to spend a little bit more time there for her senior year before she went off and explored the rest of the world, because that year out had given her exactly what she'd wanted. You got to see that Jordan was finally at peace with who he was, because he'd spent all series struggling with that. Um, Suddenly the person who needed voices of reason in his life became the voice of reason for other people. And I think that's a very, very nice way to end Jordan's arc. And of course, Jonathan came into his power as the super family are there to support Clark. Clark finally accepted that he can't do it on his own anymore. And Lois was by his side right to the end. I feel like as a fan of the show, as a fan of these characters, I feel like considering the blows the show and the season had been dealt, I think it pulled it all off magnificently.
It did. It really did. I think there was always concern, like how are we going to do Death of Superman and also end the series, like
Hmm.
how were they going to do it? And I thought they did a beautiful job. I do understand, feeling rushed in terms of the supporting characters, but they were working with what they had.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the intent more so was about growth, that none of the characters started um you know, started where they were and stayed where they were.
Hmm.
That there is an immense amount of character development in terms at least of like could it have been better throughout the seasons? Yes. But when we're just talking about where everybody lands, it might not always feel earned, but it makes sense. Because
For
at
who they
least
are, yeah.
those, yeah, for who they are, I think that's really encapsulated in Lana and Kyle's dance at
Yeah.
her wedding to John Henry. Like, it was a acknowledgement of who they were when we started. Um, and a fondness, for what the family that they did have, but also an acknowledgement of we're still family, but we're family in a different way now, and that's okay.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
it showed that they're both fine and happy, and that was really good. That was really nice to see. I think that even with Natalie too, the she had started the series, understandably, a grieving teenager, and she ends the series as a teenager who feels settled and at home in her new place. She's not yearning for the life she had before. She has accepted the life she has now. And it's like a small little scene, but it meant a lot.
It did. Yeah. And I
It
think
meant a
it,
lot that
it,
she's not like
it
that
paid tribute
anymore.
to the characters, who they are.
Hmm.
Like, you're right. The one thing about it was limited time, of course, but like you said, they worked with what they had. But we got the scene with John Henry and Natalie. We got the scene with Jordan and Sarah. We got the scene with Lana and Kyle. I think the show did what it could to wrap up a lot of those important character dynamics and let the characters land where they needed to be. And then, of course, the last one in the present day, or technically a year in the future, was Clark and Lois, because they are heart of the show. They are the main characters, and we can't say goodbye to the present without really understanding where they are. So I thought that scene in the Kent house where they finally figured out that it was really over, but at the same time also discussed what their legacy would be like before we got to see it then play out on screen. I thought that was a beautiful way to set up the final sequence.
The final sequence, the earned for one. And
Hmm.
then for two, does anyone understand how difficult it is to get fans to accept that they not only killed Lois Lane, but they also killed Clark and it's permanent?
Hmm.
And yet we're all like, beautiful finale. Just
Right.
gorgeous. Like we're just like wiping tears. We like couldn't have ended any other way. How do you manage to do that? How do you
Ah,
manage to get fandom consensus to the idea that in this universe, Lois Lane and Clark Kent are gone?
right. It makes no sense. I said earlier on about the Lex storyline that some of it maybe would have worked better on paper. in this storyline, this is something that shouldn't have worked on paper, but the execution of it nailed it because I completely agree. Um, I went with it. I didn't ask questions. And by the time then that final sequence came around, I was like, this is the best thing I've ever watched. This is amazing. Um, I when I feel like the word moving does not do enough justice to sum up the way the show ended. Um, Superman and Lois has always been about the highs and lows of life, and I feel like we saw that in that final sequence when you learned about Lois and Clark's life after that, after the this show already existed after the Adventures of Superman era because we were set 20 years in the future when they were parents. But the point of the show was that they could still have the Adventures of Superman and Lois Lane while they were also parents. With the Adventures of era over, the show continued to push the boundaries that moved further into new territory when we just got to see Clark Kent and Lois Lane as an old happily married couple. And no one's ever shown us that on screen before. And the vast majority of older Superman stories sometimes steer clear of his family dynamic because Lois Lane would have aged like a normal human and Superman would have maybe looked like he was in his mid 50s when he was in his 80s or his 90s. Um, because Kryptonians age slower. And I can understand why shows would have steered clear of that. Because the adventures of Superman would have had to continue without Lois Lane around, and there isn't a world where we need to see that story. Um, Superman and Lois made it very clear that these were two equals, that the family was what drove them, and I thought it was a I at first I maybe questioned the idea of why Lois had to go before him, and I'm not really. I know a lot of people weren't happy with the fact that they brought her cancer back, but I feel like the show very much highlighted that without Lois Lane, there was no Superman. So the fact that Clark really felt like he ceased to exist for those couple of months or years after she was gone, and he had to get a dog, which of course was Crypto, which was a beautiful moment and a nice little way of paying tribute to the comics. I feel like that really drove home the importance of their partnership, of their storyline. And I feel like Superman and Lois dealt with a lot, or the Superman story deals with a lot of extraordinary things. What the finale of Superman and Lois managed to do, and the show itself, is make the ordinary extraordinary.
That's
It,
gorgeous, Michael. That's
thank
beautiful.
you,
Sorry, that's really
thank you very
beautiful.
much. There is a humanity in the story that we've never seen in any other superhero story, and I feel like it couldn't have ended any other way than without placing the focus on what these two people, these two life partners, did throughout the rest of their lives and how they found each other again after their lives had finished. I feel like a bow to an absolutely beautiful story.
Yeah, you're making me emotional because it's
I
just,
felt it a little bit the more I started speaking. I was like, maybe I should stop now.
but no, it is just, it's a gorgeous love story. Like,
Mhm.
and love in so many capacities, which we do. Clark acknowledges that when he dies and he raises up and he's walking through his house and he's talking about the different loves he's experienced. And I was like, oh, how many more minutes do we have? Because I don't know if I have any more tears in me. Because I am over here bawling. But it's the impact of knowing how his life opened when he came back home
Mhm.
to the grace he even extends to Lex, which that did take me out for a second. I was like, "What you doing here? Like you don't belong in this house." But I was like, "Oh, this is about forgiveness. I'll allow it. I'll allow
Yeah,
it."
right.
But it's just it's so you're right. Moving's not a big enough word. It I there's no word really to describe what they managed to do, and then to end it with him seeing his superhero
Oh,
again. In the dress. She was in the dress and
yeah,
I was looking amazing, so beautiful, so gorgeous. Um, but I was like, what a way to visually show that Superman is the hero of the world and his hero is Lois Lane.
right.
Just like
Poetry.
it, yes, poetry is the right word because it's just we didn't even have to say anything. You visually represented it. And then we pull out and it's just them. And they share this sweet kiss and that's the end of Superman and Lois. Like that he's returned to his love. And love is what made him him. Like, and I think that is if the only Arrowverse show really to land the plane like that. There were some,
Yeah.
I thought Batwoman ended great. I thought Stargirl ended amazingly. Out of context, because I didn't watch the show, but when we watched it for the pod, I was like, oh well, blow everybody else out the water then. As far as their ending, but really Superman and Lois like takes the cake.
Hmm.
And it is because it's emotional. It is because it's heartfelt, but it's also because the full circleness of it. The capacity for a superhero show to talk about life in a family and the value of that. Um, we haven't seen anything like it. Like the closest we've come is in DC, it's Marvel and it's a WandaVision. But that was about grief and the
Hmm.
loss of family and love and connection. This was about not the gain of it necessarily, but the expansion of it. Like
Yeah.
the allowing yourself to full-heartedly be um, present and existing in the life that you're creating and having that have value and having Clark, accept what happened when he had Sam's heart. And that is okay. I mean the is it Lois in that argument where she tells him you are not alone anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, like so and it's so interesting, for that to be yelled at a 40-something-year-old man. But it's true, we do still like when you're used to operating a certain way, you tough love. Someone even in the middle of a battlefield has to remind you that you don't have to do this anymore. Please stop trying to do this by yourself.
Yeah.
Because we're not gonna let you do it by yourself. And I think that was that reminds me of all the kitchen table talks between
Oh
with
yeah.
um the way that you come to the kitchen table to have a serious conversation, to be able to tell them like this is what's going on. And I don't it's just I hate that we're saying goodbye.
I know.
I hate that it's the end of an era for Superman and Lois like this to be done. But I also that I think I feel incredibly grateful and thankful to, have been on this ride, but also um that superhero TV on broadcast ended like this. Like
I
that
mean,
this
yeah.
got to the meat of what people love about family dramas, what people love about superhero TV, that you can marry the two, and that this show is elite. Like
Hmm.
it's not like comfort food, which is fine, but it's a whole feast. Like a
Yeah.
whole feast. And we will maybe see something like it again, but probably not for a long while. Unless, of course, I have hope that the WandaVision stuff will be akin to it, like as we go through that journey, because it feels like that's the closest to family drama if it grows in that direction through Vision Quest and through the third show, which most likely will be about the reunification of this family. That's the closest we're gonna get.
Hmm. Yeah. I feel like the reason that Superman and Lois worked so well is that it tried something that was so specifically related to television, which was so different to what the superhero genre is. It's the same reason that WandaVision worked. It's the same reason that its recent spin-off Agatha All Along worked, in that it takes conventions of television and spins them on top of a superhero project in order to provide something extremely different. We don't see enough of that anymore. We're moving into this era of like big budget streaming TV superhero shows, which are basically just six-part movies. And the reason that Superman or Lois worked so well is that it wore its television heart on its sleeve. There's a reason the show was called nicknamed Friday Night Tights, and it's like that's the perfect example of that. It took inspiration from the likes of Friday Night Lights, This Is Us, Parenthood, real family dramas that give you so much heart, and it managed to mix that with the most famous superhero and the most famous reporter in the world. And the result, I couldn't have asked for anything more than that. I don't mind telling you, I was an absolute mess watching that last sequence for the finale. And part of that was because, oh, this is the end of the story. Part of that was because, oh, these characters are going to reunite. Or part of that was, oh, my favorite characters have died. And another part of that was, oh, they're going to end it this. This is the best possible ending. This is amazing. And in the midst of all of that, it was knowing that once the sequence was over, that was going to be the end of the show. Um, but also the end of an era. And I agree with, I don't think the era could have ended any better than that. It was an absolutely beautiful ending to an absolutely beautiful show. Um, One that hasn't had as much visibility as it deserved, but I feel like as the time has gone, this week particularly, it's been extremely visible. I feel like as the time goes on, it'll get more visible and pe more people will look back on it and really appreciate it as a real gem in the oftentimes rough world of superhero television. Um, and I couldn't have asked for a better ending than that. It was just an absolutely beautiful ending. And whatever the next era of superhero television looks like, it'll be worse off for not having a broadcast superhero show. Um, and I know there were some ups and downs along that journey, but if you get a broadcast superhero show, you want it to look like Superman and Lois did. And the fact that the show managed to wear that hard on its sleeve and wear that beautiful, exceptional reputation that it had right to the end without ever truly losing it. That is a testament to the writers, that is a testament to the actors, to the whole creative team and everybody who brought it together. Just an absolutely glorious ending to an absolutely glorious era of television.
Like, I can't believe that, we're finished.
Right. I
That
feel
that
empty inside.
I do because it is not that I'm not excited about what's to come for superhero TV in this genre. It's that we kind of see, where we're going, and it's gonna be great. Like, yeah, I love The Penguin. Exceptional award, should be award-winning television, but everything can't be grim, dark, complex, in that way, sort of art. And I know Agatha's different, but Agatha is also still a streaming, show. That there are different priorities. There are two types of television now. Well, actually three, because streaming is doing what cable did, but it's doing it
Mhm.
with a bigger budget. But for as much as people make fun of broadcast is generally where you get to be silly and
Yeah.
you get to be earnest. I think that's the
Hmm.
thing. It's not that streaming shows can't be earnest. They can be, but they're often not. Or if they are, they're often canceled.
Hmm.
Because they have a smaller audience, or they don't meet the metrics of what the streamer wants. But like television has an earnestness to it and sometimes an innocence to it, on broadcast than it does anywhere else. And I think for CW's DC TV shows in particular, uh, they leaned into that pretty hard,
Hmm.
to its detriment at times, looking at you, The Flash. Um,
Yeah.
but for the most part, it was, you may not have it might have not have always been living room television, depending on what arc they were doing. But it
Hmm.
was still something that felt wholesome a lot of times and good and meaty, in a different way than you would get on streaming. Like I feel like, and it's potentially just the fact that I'm well, not an older millennial, and we're like baby millennials in comparison, right?
Mm.
Because it's like that it's Beyonce and then there's us.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
cause
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
cause it's like 1981 to somewhere in the mid 90s or whatever. But
Hmm.
it's just we do remember a time before streaming, and much of our formative television happened on broadcast. So to see superhero TV be gone, I'm like thinking about the littles. I'm thinking about the young ones who are not gonna get this pipeline of because they have Disney Junior with Spidey and his amazing friends, and Batwheels on Cartoon
Hmm.
Network, and then we're done. Like it's just
Yeah,
like, like you kind of just they can if they have a parent or an older family member who can introduce them to some of these. Well, yeah, Max still has Teen Titans. Yes.
I want to say yes. I think
And
so.
just the original Justice League episodes, the Young
Hmm.
Justice. Okay, we're gonna tentatively say they do. So they have an older person who can introduce them to that. There's really no place for them to like, oh, I enjoy this. I don't want to watch something that isn't Y7 or G, but is TV 14, but still scaled down, young enough where I'm not like my
Hmm.
parents may not be uncomfortable, depending on the show.
Yeah.
And they're not going to have that, with exception to, well, we don't know if Miss Marvel's coming back. Um, can't think of another live action show that could potentially be on that is actually meant for teens or a more general audience.
Yeah. I feel like it's the same way that like X-Men the animated series entertained kids when they were younger, but X-Men 97 is definitely for an older audience because it's more mature, it's graphic, there's occasional blood here and there as well. Um it does feel like the end of an era because you're just not going to be able to flick on the television and see a superhero on there anymore. Of course, other networks might do reruns of the shows at some point, but it feels like it's not the same. There has, with the exception, I think, of the year between Smallville and Arrow, there has been a superhero project on network television for the last 24 years, and now we've gone basically overnight to none. I know the Arrowverse shows petered out; some of them were cancelled right away, and then the Flash ended, and now Superman and Lois is ending, and Stargirl in between as well. So I know we did kind of have a period to brace for this, but even then, it still feels kind of sudden considering 4 years ago there were like 8, 9 on suddenly just to wind up to one then to none in this one period of time is just kind of shocking. And it's not just the CW and the WB. Of course, ABC had Agents of Shield and Agent Carter. NBC tried Powerless. There was a time there where everybody was dipping their hands into the superhero cookie jar. Um, and now it just feels like that's just specifically high quality television reserved for the big studios that can afford to make it for their streaming platforms. And streaming will never replace TV and being able to just flick something on because
Mhm.
a lot of them just don't have the general stream. And even if you did, you still have to go into the streamer itself to find that. Whereas in television, you can accidentally flick something on. And no doubt about it that The Flash would have been one of the easiest shows to watch with your family because there would have been something in there for everybody. The same could be said for Superman at Lois. Whereas it just feels like this next generation of superhero content isn't going to have that. It's all going to be tied to a major part of a franchise. And depending on the type of the show it's going to be, it could be slightly more mature. It won't have family oriented storylines to go or to match the multi-generational viewing that something like The Flash would have brought in. Um, it's just we're moving into a new era, and I'm excited for what that era has to bring, but I'm also sad for what the old era is going to lose as a result of that.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it because it's not obviously there's going to be content.
Hmm.
But I feel like I've said this before on the pod. I don't want every, superhero like esque show that we watch from DC or Marvel to be prestige TV.
Yeah,
Like
right.
it's gonna get like I love a good story, but everything doesn't have to be prestige TV. It just doesn't like I and or high art.
Hmm.
Like and that's not to say, that there aren't superhero projects. Like to go back to WandaVision, it is high art, but it's also accessible.
Yeah.
Um, and in a way that I know we keep kicking the show. I'm not sorry about it, but Winter Soldier and the Falcon, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it's not like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, right? It's just dense
Yeah.
and needing to have to watch so many movies in order to understand what's going on over there. Um, I this is not kicking because I love Moon Knight.
Hmm.
Not exactly an accessible entry point for anybody unless
Yeah.
they like that style of storytelling. I'm like when I think about what TV did well, they're accessible stories. They follow
100%.
the storytelling people are used to from certain genres. They just happen to have superheroes at the center. I think for a a lot of the superhero TV we're going to get on streaming, it's either going to be far too mature, so you
Hmm.
definitely can't. be like, oh, this will be the entry point for, like my teen. Um, or it's just gonna be like I would have been a teenager that watched The Penguin, but it wouldn't be the thing that I'd be like if a teenager was like, what should I watch that's superhero? Like that's not
Yeah.
the show that I'd be like, you know what, you need to be watching right now. The Penguin. I'll leave that to your friends to suggest. I, as a
Yeah.
grown person, need to pick a different show for
Yeah.
you to tune into. And I'm sure there will be like I guess I haven't watched Agatha. I guess Agatha would be
Yeah.
accessible. WandaVision
Yeah.
obviously accessible.
Yeah, totally. I feel like they toy with different genres to appeal to different audiences, and that does make them more accessible to a wider audience. Whereas versus something like The Penguin, if you know what I mean, it's just gritty, gritty, and a little bit more gritty. You know what I mean? The Penguin, absolute work of art, but at the same time, it's still, there's no arguing there. A show like Superman and Lois or even The Flash is far more accessible to wider audiences than The Penguin. You can't sit down and watch The Penguin with your whole family. I mean, like I really wouldn't recommend that. Don't do it, please. But at the same time, it's high art television, and I do appreciate it for what it is. There is room for everything, which is why it bothers me so much that one particular era of television is on its way out. Um, it doesn't need to happen. Um, but no, it's very true. Like you could flick on the Flash from its third episode when he was battling the mist and like basically miss nothing. Watch that episode and start watching the rest of the series from that. If you'd missed the pilot, I would recommend going back and watching the pilot in the second episode because I'm that kind of TV viewer. But like if you in this era where streaming and things weren't always available, if you flicked it on from episode 3, there's no reason you couldn't have watched right through to season 9, episode 13. If you did, fair play because some of it was rough. But
Mhm.
anyways, um, it was accessible like that. You could tune in, you could tune out, and not miss as much. And I know we're moving past the age where 22 episodes of television, where like 15 of them are filler, isn't feasible anymore, especially for actors who want to do other things. I respect that. But like Superman at Noah showed, you can do network TV in 10. You can do network
Mhm.
TV in 13 or 15 as well. Um, there is a room for everything. Um, which is why I'm not happy about it ending. But if it had to end, I'm thrilled that Superman and Lois got to end it on such a triumphant, heartfelt movie note because I wouldn't have trusted any other show to do it like that.
I know. So I guess because Mo works at WB.
Yeah.
And I do think that Mole has some feelers over at Disney as well. Um, if there were if there were a few things to give to the Mole, it would be, hopefully people take notes of Superman and Lois to integrate their shows into. Please get the heads of the departments to realize that you do need shows that skew younger.
Mm.
Like because the my concern, which I don't know how many people have this concern, but I do, that there will be a generation fall off
Yeah.
because you cannot just cater to your base and then not try to get new people in. That I think would be the issue. You need a superhero show that's like a Percy Jackson.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
Like you just do. Like I don't they don't you don't have to have five of them, but two would work, you know? Um and I think that there should be attention to that. There needs to be a value in children's programming and preteen and teen programming. Because that's how you get those people to like everyone's like, the kids don't watch anything. You're not catering to them. That is
That's
why they aren't
so
fulfilled.
true. Yeah. 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 Right.
So I think at Marvel and DC, since you're the two big ones, you need to pay attention to the kids in some capacity instead of just selling them toys to movies that they can't even go to. Like I'm so sure there's if it's not already there, there's probably a Kraven the Hunter toy in Target or Walmart, and those babies can't go see that movie, or they could, but the parent may
Yeah.
have some trouble explaining some things.
That's an excellent point, and you can even see it in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well. That franchise has gotten so significantly older, and its audience has obviously gotten so significantly older. But let's not forget the fact that Iron Man, Captain America, the First Avenger, the Incredible Hulk, Thor, those first generation of movies were very easily accessible to a wide variety of audiences. They were family movies. There's still some of my favorite movies to watch with my family. And the fact of the matter is, they were always easily accessible to a huge audience, and some of the Deadpool and Wolverine is the exception because it was the first time Marvel's ever did something like that and it did it wonderfully well. But generally we're not getting as many of those movies because these Avengers movies have become such a big, dramatic event. We're spacing them out so far apart. I'm not saying we need an Avengers movie every year, so no one misquote me on that. But we're spacing them out so far apart as the end game of every phase that we're kind of forgetting about what needs to exist within the phase leading up to it. And a lot of the more recent movies just haven't been accessible to wider audiences. Um, Ant-Man is a fun, kid-friendly movie. The first two were fun heist movies, and then the third one was an Avengers level, murky, CGI heavy, dark movie, and it just didn't appeal to the same audience. So, not to get too into the MCU weeds there, I do think there just needs to be a little bit of a chat about, yes, the MCU has the biggest fan base to ever exist in the history of Hollywood. Brilliant. But as with everything, just like television ratings, it will drop off at some point. So we need to find a way to appeal to the generation that got us there in the first place, which is being by producing kid-friendly movies, appeal to the next generation of kids and the generation of kids after that. Make more Iron Man-like movies with recognizable heroes. And like the Thor movies, for example, have gotten so far off the wall. They have screaming goats and innuendo jokes, which again, the screaming goats might appeal to the kids, but the jokes won't. Whereas the first Thor movie was more heroic, more traditionally super heroic, and you had like then that love story in there as well. And I know people aren't fussed on the love story, but you know what I mean. I just feel like as we move into this next generation, we need to find a way to revive the fun that appeals to the younger generation of the earlier installments. If we can do that via TV shows on broadcast television, via movies that focus on these standalone heroes to build up to it, via coherent storytelling, I feel like there's a way to bring it all together because it just feels like everything's gotten so bigger, we've kind of forgot to be better.
Yes, I think, for instance, the young Avengers aren't going to be young by the time we get to them.
That's an excellent point. We could have done that 3 or 4 years ago, two or
Well,
three years ago.
and it didn't have to be a movie. What,
No, it
like,
didn't.
could have been a TV show. Like, it'd have been fine. I am going to be in the minority of this, but, instead of waiting forever for the X-Men, they could have done basically a rip of X-Men Evolution and done these characters as teenagers.
Yeah.
And I know some people are like, no, why? And I'm like, because one, you wouldn't have to wait forever. And two, we've done so many X-Men movies, you don't necessarily need another one, Like
Hmm.
it could have been a TV show of the teenagers, them just as teenagers. I mean, because X-Men Evolution favorite X-Men adaptation, to be honest, on my part. Like I just love that one came at a perfect time too. I was a kid. It was on
Hmm.
WB. So it was enjoyable. Everything does not have to be a big theater event.
Hmm.
I know for them it's because they want the money, but you want the money because you're also handing out $200 million. And we could just stop doing that. We could just
Yeah.
stop having $200 million budgets. That's the thing that could stop happening.
Exactly. And I feel like the Young Avengers you brought up a great point is a show that would work perfectly on like network television. And I know there's the whole global situation in there, but Disney have a broadcast arm in ABC. So why wouldn't we what we should do is our Young Avengers on ABC at 8 p.m. in one of the prime time slots, while simultaneously dropping it on Disney Plus around the rest of the world so that everybody else can watch it, and then put it on Disney Plus in the US the day afterwards. You get on the night ratings and you get all the streaming figures you've been craving around the rest of the world. I feel like I know there's obviously more involved in that in terms of what I've just said in network versus streamers, but it's an idea to keep superheroes on television. And I feel like the Young Avengers is one I think that I feel like would appeal to a broad audience of younger people. Young would literally be in the title. Although according to another rumor, we're retitling it Champions. We'll have to wait and see if that pays off. But either way, you have a brand there that is marketable. You have characters there that are marketable to a younger audience, and you could have it on network television just to boot. That would be fun. It would be like a way of keeping the old alive with the new. There's so much we could go into, and we really don't have the time. But just generally, I feel like the end of the superhero TV era, it's bittersweet. I'm excited for what's to come, but I hate that we have to lose such a pivotal era, at least in terms of our lives, and it has been for the generation before us as well. Um, and what an era it was.
Yes. Also, okay, manifesting this because streaming is a different beast, but the feel of broadcast superheroes on streaming. Let's
Yes.
just move it over to the new home.
Yep.
Shouldn't be that hard. Like, I just really, we need mid-budget shows. Create
100%.
mid-budget shows. Like, oh, but you can't spend that much money on broadcast. Okay, give a streaming show with the budget a broadcast show would have then. And just let
Right.
them run. Like, don't like starve them. But like if the concern is like, oh well, we just don't have the budget. Like, yeah, you do. Everything just doesn't need to be um so hefty. I think Agatha, right? Practical sets. Did they not have practical sets? Like it wasn't all we're standing in a big CGI bubble as we record the entire show.
No, 100% practical effects. Obviously there were some CGI skies here and there, but generally practical effects throughout the whole show. The Witches Road set, which they spent most of the season on, all practical, all really built. The beauty of lighting made it look like it was really nighttime. And I believe that was the cheapest Marvel show they've produced thus far. And like all you need to do is look at the streaming numbers. All you need to do is look at the acclaim that is received around the world, and you will say that that has probably been one of their best investments because they didn't spend as much on it because the risky era hasn't exactly paid off. So they took less risks and reaped all of the rewards as a result of that. Um, and there's definitely something to be said there because I feel like Agatha's budget it was less than 40 million, which may have brought it closer to what a network television show's budget is, or a more expensive network television show's budget. I think I remember reading that some of the episodes of The Flash cost like 3 million in its early season, and you times that by 22 and you have a big budget. So if Agatha was cheaper than a network TV show and yet it still managed to look incredibly cinematic, job well done in my estimation. Let's do more of that.
Yes. Okay. Manifesting at all. Manifesting that. They need to like take those notes, learn from Agatha, because we need it in this as we say goodbye to broadcast superhero TV, and mourn its loss. That might seem dramatic to some, but like literally out here mourning. Been mourning since they final season Superman and Lois, and now that Superman and Lois is off. I'm like, wow, we're really about to go through life for the first time for some of us without access to superhero TV on actual TV. Um, that's depressing. But we're here. We are millennials of a certain age, and that's just our experience. And
Yep.
we will, I don't want to say move on is the right word. We will just carry on.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
yeah,
We'll look back on it with wonder and glory and love, because it was really truly what a time to be alive it's been. And there were lots of ups and downs as there is when a projects are on the air for 24 years. But like we started the superhero TV era with Superman and we ended the superhero TV era with Superman. And what a way to close the book. Um, Smallville was obviously pivotal in all of our lives growing up. It was on TV constantly. And Superman at Lois was a high quality, fulfilling way to end that chapter. Um, and just to pivot back to the finale, because we should make this episode about Superman and Lois because
yeah.
I struggle with it. Is this the end of the Arrowverse or is it the end of Superman and Lois? And every other show that ended got its own flowers. So Superman and Lois deserves its own flowers in the spotlight for a little moment. This show has been an absolute joy of mine. It might have supplanted Smallville as my favorite show of all time. Um, it's been an absolute joy. Tyler Hoechlin and Bitsy Tulloch, and indeed the rest of the cast have been just an absolute super addition to the TV schedule every week. Watching them play these legendary characters every day or every week for the last 4 years has just been an absolute joy. They're truly a career-defining performances, but also performances that will define the characters for a long time to come. Any other adaptation of Superman and Lois Lane is going to have a tough job, even reaching the level of Superman's cape when it comes to this portrayal, and that cape goes right all the way to the
Yes,
ground.
it does.
Um, uh, it's just, yeah, truly defining performances as these characters in a truly defining story. My favorite Superman story ever told, and quite possibly the best Superman story ever told. Um, I love Superman and Lois so much, and it really went out on a high.
It did, and I want to say thank you to the
Yeah.
cast and crew. I think there is something so heartwarming about, being a part of a journey in which a show and a team behind the show wore their hearts on their sleeve the entire time.
Mhm.
Um,
Truly.
I think for people who love craft, whether it's in, the acting or it's the special effects, it's the set production, the writing, the directing, the cinematography. Um, I think it is really a masterclass, particularly, with the writing, just I said this earlier in the pod, the fearlessness.
Hmm.
Like if it is definitely a show, if you wanted to study what it's like to be fearless as a writer, this is it.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about material that's been done before, that's been done certain ways, that's well beloved, that people have a lot of opinions on. And they were like, great, we hear you, not what we're doing,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Like that is we are a family drama about a super family. And we're going to stay a family drama about a super family. And you're still going to get what you love about Superman and what you love about superhero shows. But we are going to talk about life and love and connection and what it means to, have disagreements with your friends, have disagreements with your family members, with the people you love, to be able to argue and come out of that argument not with the whole world destroyed, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Like I think there are healthy explorations of relationships. Even when those
Hmm.
relationships would deteriorate, they would heal and they would form into something else. And I think that's important television to have. I think TV does that a lot. And broadcast TV does that a lot. And I think that is worthy of praise. It was worthy of being awarded some of the bigger awards. It did not get that. It deserved it. I think is Superman and Lois is an example of not being nominated for something doesn't mean that the material that was shown wasn't award worthy because it
Well,
absolutely
yeah.
was. They should have gone home with awards their entire
Definitely.
run.
Definitely. It deserved more visibility and attention from these big ceremonies. And Bitsy Tulloch definitely deserved an Emmy
Yes.
nomination for her portrayal of Lois last season, particularly. Um,
Tyler deserves
uh,
one for this season.
100%. We've
He
had
does.
such nuanced character arcs and such incredible portrayals of them. Like you said, these are larger than life characters, and we managed to, I don't want to say bring them down to the level of TV, but give them very normal storylines and also see them, like I said, balance the ordinary with the extraordinary. And I feel like that's why network television, specifically network television, worked so well with this genre, with this premise. And they didn't just understand the assignment, they exceeded the assignment. And like Tyler Hoechlin will go down in history as one of the best Supermans of all time. He's definitely the best modern portrayal of Superman. And Bitsy Tulloch, just absolutely exactly the same. We don't talk about Lois Lane as a character enough. And I feel like this show insisted on showcasing why they're both superheroes, and both Tyler and Bitsy did a wonderful job of bringing them to life. Without a doubt, in my book, the definitive adaptations of both versions of the characters, and it'll be a long time if ever, if anyone ever manages to come close to them. Absolutely phenomenal.
Just you can't gush enough. You just really, really can't. Just an exceptional TV series. Period. Not even just for the superhero
Yeah.
genre. Just period. It's
And
one of the
through and
best.
through. Yeah, through
Yeah.
and through and right to the end.
Yes, one of the best shows ever on podcast.
No doubt about it. No doubt. And what a legacy to go out with. I mean, like I said, it made it right through to the end. Um, I didn't expect anything less from the show than to go out on such a high note. But again, exceeded expectations. And that's what
Yes.
we've come to expect from Superman at Lois.
Yes. So I think we have to leave it here because it is just there again going back, there are just no words to describe. We
Hmm.
did do it, but I feel like we just scratched the surface of our feelings. But what
Yeah.
a surface to scratch. Like
Right.
it's just and that's how shows should end. You should feel that
Yeah.
way when a show ends. So again, thank you to the team
Thank you.
behind the show, and thank you y'all for being on this journey with us.
It's been a wild
What a
ride.
journey. It's been a wild
Yeah.
ride. And with highs and lows, disappointments and triumphs. And this was a triumphant ending.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, yeah, I agree. Thank you, Superman at Lois, for an absolutely amazing journey. We couldn't have asked for anything better from you. It's incredible through and through.
Oh, I don't want to end the pod because
Me
it means
too.
that
Me
it's
neither.
done.
I
It means
know.
it's done. But we are gonna end it. So thank you for watching and listening, you guys. We're the CW Spiral. I'm Sabrina.
And I'm Michael.
Long live Superman and Lois.
Always.
Bye, y'all.